We Shouldn't Have Been Listening by Zero Option. Yesterday we made first contact. I really wish we hadn't. Let me start over. My name is Dr. Reggie Zylstra. I'm the head of linguistic cryptography for SETI. At 1925 yesterday, we received a transmission on the 1420 kilohertz frequency. The power level was astronomical, to say the least, if you forgive my bad dad jokes. I was off-site conducting synchronicity checks on the dish arrays with my students when it all went down. I got a frantic call from Dr. Davidson asking if we'd activated the test calibration network on the dishes yet. I told her we hadn't even begun sync checks, let alone begun calibration. She informed me to forget it, send the students home, and head back to the barn right away. Absolutely perplexed, I still complied. I sent my grad students home, surprising absolutely no one to their own excitement, and began walking briskly back to the barn to find out who crapped all over my time block. It can take weeks or months to book a block of radio telescope time, and now I was losing a whole night of hard book time that took me months to get. Someone had better tell me who crapped all over my time block and dismissed my students. I've got to justify this to my... Reg, look at this. Dr. Davidson forced a printout into my hands. My eyes quickly scanned the lines of code and was immediately drawn to line 2/3 down the page. Is this correct? Did we get this confirmed? We were trying to do that now. There's a lot going on with it. So much doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now. Stacy, what do you mean? Can you please just explain this to me? Reg, look at the readout on the array screens. I walked over to the monitor displaying the status of the array. 120 8-meter radio telescopes arranged in concentric diminishing rings like a bullseye. And only 9 of the dishes have been activated. There's got to be some kind of mistake. Like an artifact of a transmission, leakage from spy satellites. Like, this is way too narrow of a... We checked, Reg. The skies were clear, and the strangeness doesn't even stop there. All right, Stacy, show me. Dr. Davidson slid the tablet to me. The signal followed the dishes. What do you mean? How many times am I going to have to ask this tonight? What do you mean? When we registered the transmission, Reg, we went through all the standard plates. We skipped frequencies, all that. And when we piloted the dishes off of the signal, it followed them in every direction, any angle. That's impossible, even for our satellites. I know it's impossible, but it happened. The signal followed the dishes, maintained perfect frequency, no red or blue shift, and the amplitude was just shy of the burnout threshold for our receivers. So it's either aliens so advanced they can manipulate energy in ways we can't even comprehend, or the most elaborate prank I've ever seen. And if it's the latter, I'm going to bury the SOBs underneath those dishes out back. Reg, I know it's way too early to say this, but I think we both know this isn't a prank. Not even Elon could pull this one off. Stacy, what was the telemetry point of origin? Well, Boot's void, but no known stars on those vectors. What in the hell's going on then? Reg, I'm not sure I know, but before you arrived, we were given orders to cease all work. Not just here, but every site, all across the whole Event Horizon network. Here, check the group chat. I pulled out my own phone, almost as an afterthought, put the password in and opened up group chat. Everyone was losing their ever-loving minds. Every observatory was under lockdown. All of them. Soldiers and cops arrived to escort all of our friends and colleagues to God knows where. Stacy, we need to leave now. Reg, don't be so effing paranoid. They're not going to kill us. Just as she said those words, the rhythmic thump-thump of choppers got louder in the distance. Crap, it's already too late. We gotta hide copies of everything we can right now. Reg, slow down. You're being paranoid. Stace, they've silenced every observatory. Every one of our colleagues is missing right now. They're coming to cover this up. And if it's what you and they think it is, the only chance we have to confirm it is to hide some hard copies now and then look at it when everything blows over. Stacy and I quickly began photocopying all the printouts we could get and stashing them in places we hoped they wouldn't look. The chopper sound grew deafening as it began to land. Stacy, were the barn doors closed on the optical telescopes? Yeah, fortunately we're doing maintenance on the lasers tonight. Oh, thank God for small miracles, I guess. No sooner did I finish speaking than the doors to the main area opened up and 6 armed men walk in, all with the stink of alphabet agency on them. The lead agent, who clearly took himself way too seriously, said out loud, "Everyone just stay where you are, please. Are you two the only 2 occupants in this building this evening?" "Yeah, we sent our grad students home early tonight. We had equipment malfunctions." "You can dispense with the theatrics, Staff Sergeant Zylstra. We're well aware of who you are and what you can do. 7 years U.S. Army, 75th Rangers, Special Tactical Battalion. Regimental Recon Company? You're a very dangerous man, Staff Sergeant. Just Reg. I'm retired. As I was saying, Reg. We know who you are, how smart you actually are. I'm sure by now you've already plotted how to kill me and my team in very, very creative ways. I know you already have 7 tours. You finished a PhD in linguistic cryptography before your 28th birthday. Okay, I get it. You read my file. What's with the Men in Black shtick? I'm sorry, Dr. Zilcher. Let me start over. I simply wish to convey my respect for you and your colleague. Don't worry, Dr. Davidson. We know all about you too. And I didn't leave you out of the conversation due to some misogynistic reason either. I needed to put the bigger threat at ease first, so the situation didn't get ugly. I'm sure you understand. We know you already have 2 PhDs, one of the foremost experts in radio astronomy and gravitational singularities. So listen, I know we're on the low end of the IQ totem pole here. I just need you to know we're not your enemy, and we very well may need your help here. So do you say we gather up all the data, including the copies I know you hid all around the building, and get going so you can see your colleagues again? Then hopefully you'll choose to help us out? Stacy looked me dead in the eyes. I gave her a small nod of reassurance. It'll be okay, I promise. 20 minutes later, we were airborne and headed southwest at a good clip. I leaned over to the lead agent. You never introduced yourselves or what agency you're with. The agent smiled and said, You're right, I didn't. Leaning back, I said into the mic, Bloody spooks, causing all the agents around me to break into laughter. 2 hours later into the flight, we were setting down at a remote Air Force base. As the helicopter spooled down, the lead agent put his hand up as we tried to unbuckle. Just wait here, guys, we're not done yet. As the chopper shook and a feeling of falling took over. The effing landing pad was an entrance to a secret base? Had I just zoomed into a freaking James Bond movie? This can't be real life, I thought. Dr. Davidson, you seem rather unperturbed. Well, I assume we're at Nellis Site 7, correct? Astute guess, but how? I guess you didn't read too far into my file, did you, Agent? I did my postdoc here. Well, I guess I missed that part, Dr. Davidson. As the platform came to a stop, we were ushered out of the hangar space down several long hallways to a large hemisphere of a room. Christ, it must have been 50 meters across and at least 5 high. Full of screens, computers, and sure enough, all of our friends and colleagues, unharmed as promised. Reg, Stacy, come here, you guys gotta check this out. I stopped dead, fully annoyed. Will someone please tell me what the fuck is going on here? The lead agent stepped forward. Staff Sergeant. It's Dr. Agent. Right, I'm sorry. Dr. Zylstra. The fact is, we don't know what is going on. That's why we gathered you all here, with all the data secure in one location, with all the supercomputing power you could ask for, and more IQ points in one room than the rest of the world over. Alright? We need your help. Because right now, there's a lot of nations with very itchy trigger fingers, and our best analysts say the ability to hoax what happened here is generations beyond anyone's ability to pull this off. And if this is first contact, we need to determine motive, and fast. My guts twisted up inside as the agent continued to explain how utterly out of the depth they were trying to comprehend and control the situation. He'd seen this before in combat. On his last stop to kill a high-value target, when the local PSSG broke and ran, leading a 6-man team to suppress a company-sized group with small arms and no air support. And this situation felt no different. I hated having my ass hung out with a big old bullseye on it. What's the catch? No catch, Doctor. If you agree, stay, get paid, solve the biggest mystery of maybe all time. If you don't, you sign a couple of NDAs, get debriefed, and a lift home. This is all volunteer, Doc. Well, Agent, if you read my file, you know what I'm already going to say. I'm in. Show me where I fit in here. I figured at this point I was in too deep to simply just cut and run. I never quit on a mission. Why would this be any different? So I took a position and began to assist Dr. Davidson on collating the acquired data into beginning cryptographic analysis. We got to see if this is a message or just noise. Staring lazily into my 8th cup of fighting off sleep, I muttered, I'll give the spooks this. They certainly have the best coffee in all the branches. All we determined so far that 26 pulses have been logged and received, each corresponding to the frequency spectrum lines of the first 26 elements on the periodic table. It certainly wasn't naturally occurring, as it happened all over the globe, in the exact same manner, at the exact same time. But I wasn't getting any smarter the longer I stayed awake. So like the old adage said, when in doubt, rack out. So, I asked the closest agent to show me where the dorms were, grabbed my MP3 player with a recording of all 26 signals on it. Hell, the background noise would probably stifle the overwhelming sterility of this place. I was shown to a remarkably lush room to sleep in. Wasn't this typical of the chair force? The agent just looked at me and smiled and quipped, "Do you think they spent $20,000 on a hammer and $30,000 on a toilet seat?" I laughed and said, "That was a great movie." "Yes, it was. Good night, doctor." "Good night, agent." Settling into the bed, I put my earbuds in and drifted off. I'm no stranger to nightmares. I've suffered my fair share because of my line of work, but nothing like this. Normally, I just wake up from them. This was different in ways I can't even fathom. A world wrapped in darkness, the cacophonous noise of battle, indescribable creatures stalking the landscape, killing indiscriminately. I watched a 30-foot tall something grab a soldier and peel his skin off before my eyes, then tearing him in half and tossing the pieces away like nothing. Several creatures bounded into a group of civilians trying to run away, tearing them to literal pieces, body parts and offal spraying and flying everywhere. The cries and screams of parents and their children falling silent. And then, in the distance, a noise began to rise up, a wail filled with anguish and pain. I awoke with a start to find out it was me screaming, my pillow soaked in tears and sweat. I staggered over to the sink and went to splash cold water on my face when my reflection in the mirror took me by surprise. My eyes were bleeding. I quickly washed up and assessed myself. No scratches, anything. Maybe I was under more stress than I thought. Wandering from the room, I headed in the direction from which I came last night. Or was it this morning? Shit, I can't tell under here. Stumbling into the break room, I grabbed a coffee and a bagel and sat down. Jesus, Reg, you look like death. Really fucked up dreams, like enormously fucked up. I'm sorry, do you want to talk about it, or? It's okay, Stacy. It's probably just the stress. Stacy gave me a look, one of those telling looks, the kind that said she didn't believe me, but would leave well enough alone for now. Well, whenever you're ready, we've got something right up your alley. My curiosity was so immediately piqued, I almost immediately forgot about the bowel-voiding ordeal in my dreams. I followed Dr. Davidson into the main dome, where up on the main screens were multiple readouts all showing the transmissions. I looked at them twice and something wasn't quite clicking with me. Can you guys overlay these transmissions on top of each other? Alright, now zoom in on the smallest possible timescale we can muster here. Alright, guys, you see there? These gaps in the transmissions? Why didn't we see these before? We spent all morning parsing and plotting the gaps. We finally realized that the observatory computers weren't sensitive enough to detect the gaps, each nanosecond of recording having multiple picosecond gaps. The more and more we processed, we came to the realization that this was beyond any of our imaginations. This message seemed to have so many layers and complexity of dimensionality, we could scarcely wrap our heads around it. We broke for lunch once we realized we had less than 1% of 1% of the data done. We decided we needed to retool the supercomputers instead, to plot the data on a rotatable 3D chart. This wound up actually being our first real snag, as the data was so multi-layered, each plot wound up being close to a 40 frame minute video as opposed to a simple 3D plot. Our excitement was palpable. Not only was this proof of alien life, but it was possibly even an audio-visual representation of them. It was epic defining. This was a real once-in-a-lifetime, hell, once-in-a-species event. The supercomputers recalculated the time remaining to completion at 17 hours. With this information, the team decided they wanted to celebrate the occasion. I declined, being still tired and shaken from the night before. I decided to stay back and look over what data had been plotted out already. I wasn't quite sure, but it appeared to have a written element in the plotting itself. I decided to quickly sketch out what it looked like I was seeing onto, well, it was either a written language or the worst time to have a case of pareidolia I could think of. So after 5 minutes of quickly sketching out what it looked like I was seeing, it looked like I had enough to start with, so I plugged it into my computer. The algorithm almost immediately came up with binary. I was floored. It looked like they included a translation key into binary. Setting back to work, I began translating. They appeared to be sending mathematical equations inside the plot itself. This was becoming unreal. My head was spinning. I was clearly way too tired for this. I decided to lay down at the desk and just close my eyes for a little bit. When my eyes opened, the sky was on fire. I was standing in a large field. The ground was made of ash and bones and body parts. I could see shapes moving in the distance. The sound of horns and screams filled the air around me. I looked over the nearest rise to see a mob of people running, being chased by those indescribable abominations. A massive, shifting creature rose up from the ash in the path of the mob. It reached out a scythed-fingered arm, grabbing a huge swath of them, pulping them as another thing strode over me, horns bellowing toward them to join in. I awoke with a start. This was more than a coincidence, I thought. A warning, maybe? But how? I don't know how or of what. Something about this was bugging me on just a primal level. The display chimed complete. With a mounting dread, I called the team in. We could cut the tension with a knife as we played the translated data. We were absolutely blown away by what we were looking at. The figure was vaguely humanoid. 4 arms, each with long 4-digited hands, a head, leg-like membranes, and a large pair of wing-like membranes on its back. And to the left of it was a small pair of figures. They looked like... No, they were perfect copies of the human figures on the Voyager plaque. If this was to scale, holy Christ, they must be 25 or 20 meters tall. And kind of look like biblical angels. Well, that sent a little bit of a shiver down my spine, but the creatures in my nightmares were the same size maybe. I just didn't recall any of the real details about them. That feeling of dread just wouldn't go away, though. The data being translated from binary appeared to be instructions on how to communicate with them using our own arrays. The images began to shift to a star cluster, zooming into a star system with 5 planets, finally settling on what we assumed was their world. It was a Cumenopolis. Remarkable. It flashed to another system, with 15 planets, and a different alien this time, ovoid with 30 appendages that looked like arms or legs. And another, 26 separate systems and different aliens. Shit, we were beyond floored. Not only did we just find out that we weren't alone in the universe, that we were simply one species among many. I don't know, maybe my gut feeling was wrong. I'm so conflicted. The message didn't seem to convey anything besides, really, hi, we're here, you guys want to talk? At least that seemed to be the consensus among the group and the brass overseeing this endeavor. So finally the decision came down to attempt communication with them. We were going to relocate to the site they called Uniform Tango, deep in the Gobi Desert. It had an underground nuclear power plant to power its deep space scanner array. The higher-ups seemed to think it was going to be hard enough to make a first communication back, but to tell them that we hear them would relish the chance to talk and learn from them. It took 2 weeks of around-the-clock work to prepare the array for the response to their message. The supercomputers had their instructions. The power supply was ready. The dishes were in position. Most of us were in the command center. Well, some of us went to the dishes to watch in person. We thought it silly, but hey, who's going to be a spoilsport on such a momentous occasion, right? Lights across the boards were lit green as we were transmitting. At that point, the CCTV cameras monitoring the dish site began to experience a little bit of static. We figured they just couldn't cope with all their EM radiation. We didn't notice the massive distortion appearing above the array because of it. What we did see chilled me to my very core. My heart stopped as 2 massive scythe-fingered arms ripped through the distortion into the ground. Tendrils of black misty metal began to flow outwards towards the perimeter of the distortion field. More scything fingers gripped the forming ring and appeared to be trying to rip it open larger. A bulbous protrusion belonging to the first 2 arms descended through the opening, as 4 more pairs of arms followed. The bulbous extremity began to split, contort, shifting constantly, shedding something. We looked over at the monitor feed showing the drone cameras and watched the shedded things hit the ground and immediately start running and attacking anything in sight. The first large creature bellowed its bone-shattering call. Gathering my wits, I cursed that this had to be a trap. Of course it did. The 2 generals behind me started calmly talking into their headsets. Steel Rain, this is Viper Nest. Cleared hot fire mission. Final protective fire on Alpha Designator. Sustained bombardment. Out. Reaper 10, this is Viper Nest 2. All birds cleared hot. Glass Alpha box. Out. The 2 generals looked at me and said, we were hopeful it wouldn't be needed, but we planned for the worst. Arty, missiles, bombs. We're gonna sterilize that whole grid square. Generals, we need to tank the computers and reactors connected to the array to stop this broadcast. Everything's already under control, Doctor, the general said coolly. We prepared for everything on this one. Hopefully, we won't need to escalate beyond Final Protective Fire Level 5. Do I want to know, General? 6 2-megaton nuclear devices primed to detonate if this facility goes quiet. Everything within a 20-mile radius will be vaporized, only to be used if eradication and disengagement fails. So I didn't want to know, did I, General? No, probably not, as power flickered in the command area when the reactor went offline, leaving the base to run strictly on diesel and batteries. The array was struck by the first rounds from Final Protective Fire missions. The creatures were unaffected. The dishes began to collapse at the same time the distortion field collapsed, shattering the partially disassembled ring structure and severing the hands holding it open. The smaller creatures seemed to fade and die almost instantly, only lasting just a bit longer the further they were from ground zero. Finally, the large multi-limb monster held on longer, but finally seemed to be taking substantial damage now. Limbs were shearing off. It was on fire and dying. Being cut off appeared to render it mortal, but still not permanently corporeal. As time went on, the parts literally faded from existence. We watched in stunned silence as the drone showed the devastation in HD. The next day, we were sitting in a debrief, listening to one general discuss how lucky casualties were so low and damage was relatively contained. 3 dozen civilian deaths, $51 billion in hardware destroyed. I was both incensed at the callousness of the appraisal and oddly in agreement at the same time. I postulated to the group that these invaders used images and information from their victims to entice sufficiently advanced species to reach out and create a gateway to their world, at which point they move in and exterminate the potential threat. Basically, a berserker probe. The brass seemed to agree. The incident was logged and shared with every government on Earth to prevent a second attempt at communication. I finished the debrief by telling them that we had the answer to the question of whether or not we were alone. That was settled. Unfortunately, that answer was so terrifying that future generations will wish we never asked the question or answered. Dr. Davidson and I were thanked for our time. We were asked to sign novels worth of NDAs, promised 20 years of funding to buy our silence, to which we were pretty grateful, all things considered. 18 weeks later, Dr. Davidson and I were conducting a routine scan when our board lit up briefly, then went dark again, lit up, in a rhythmic pulse, binary, on the 1420 kHz channel. I started to parse the message. W, E, K, N, O, W. We know where you are. We won't fail again.